All right, welcome everyone. I wouldn't say it's a presentation, but a small info event on IFT. And here we're talking about the assembly experts for outer fittings. I think every single person who is working in the construction industry, whether you're a planner, a supplier, anything at all, you probably know that on the construction side, most of the times we don't really have ideal conditions, that unforeseen issues can arise, whether it is from downstream players in the value chain, and that actually leads to the fact that the assembly can be quite challenging. And of course, in the assembly process, the best product, the best window can be impaired, can be damaged relatively quickly, and that's why assembly or installation as the last element in the quality chain, in the manufacturing chain, is, of course, a very big part. And now, of course, we also have to say, even though the planning is very important, you also need people on site who are well trained in order to be able to, if need be, find the right solutions on site and also help with the actual installation to adjust their process, to adjust their approach. And what really only works in very few instances is that you do assembly window installation without any plan. So usually a good assembly, a good installation starts with good planning. I have to know what sort of insulation system is suitable for the wall. I need to know how to fix it to the wall. What sort of a wall is it? Is it concrete? Is it tile? Is it wood? According to all of those different conditions, I actually need to choose the fixtures. Now, due to the fact that installation isn't necessarily super well trained in the different trainees, whether it's a carpenter, whether it is a window worker, whether it's, whatever it is, it's sort of like a blind spot in the entire, well, construction industry, I would almost say. And that's why for many, many years now, we've actually had a training set up. We've developed it at the IFT for an installation specialist for windows and external doors. Now, if you look at what's coming before the training, you should already have a training close to the construction industry, whether you're working in the window industry, whether you're a metal worker, whether you are, a painter, whether you're a carpenter, a wall builder, anything like that. Those are all construction jobs that bring a certain amount of experience. You know the right terminology, the internal wall as installation, pre-wall installation, etc., etc. So if you're completely foreign to the industry, you're going to be struggling, I have to say. But on the flip side, you also don't have to be a foreman or an engineer with full pre-existing knowledge, so that the minimum qualifications are relatively easy. It's simply a pre-existing training in the technical area. Now, here is our website. This is the IFT Rosenheim, and I would just like to take you through the data a little bit. So if we start with the price is at the very top. It's 1,695 euros for this particular training. You will also get a diploma. So this is an IFT installation specialist for Windows. That's the official title. And there we go. Let's just go down a little bit. In the meantime, I should pretty much say thanks to Corona. So thanks to Corona, the training offers have actually increased and have actually now been added with online elements, so that at the end of the day, you basically only need to be on site for 3 days. So a large part of the theoretical part of the training can be done online via an online seminar. And all in all, it's basically 3 on-site days split up into 2 blocks. And one block with 1 day, the second block with 2 days, because that's also where the practical assessment is, as well as the oral examination, because It's very important to us that this title of being a specialist is not something that you only get by just showing up. So we really want to make sure that you have to prove that you actually understood the content. Now, in this last block where you need to be present, you also need to, or you also need to pre- we also need to prepare the examination on the Friday. We will also show you what we're going to be assessing down the line so that everybody really has the opportunity to prepare accordingly and in a targeted manner. And then, as I said, the rest is online, spread out over different modules. And we are very comprehensively teaching lots of different topics. So it's from physical foundations. What's a U value? What is heat, insulation? All of that is being trained so that you know the different KPIs. And then, of course, also the product area is covered here. So we're really talking about all of the sealing systems in a very detailed way, whether it's films, rings, profiles. So really anything and everything that is available on the market is what we're introducing here. And of course, what's also very important is the limits of the application, just so you're really able to understand and decide which sealing system is important and is the right one, also from a cost perspective for the respective use case. And then, of course, a large part of the training is also the actual assembly. So we can also show you how to do the manual calculations. However, in practice, I think you're not really doing manual calculations anymore, and that's why we, of course, also have simple tables that we've developed, which most cases, I would say, help you figure out the number of necessary fixings and screws via these tables. But what, of course, is used way most often in practice is the EFT assembly and installation planner, which basically does all of that automatically. So we're also introducing you with that. Can you use it? Um, how can you find out more about it? So really, nobody is going to do any more practical hands-on calculations. Now, the entire training is based on the guideline for installation. This is the 2020 um, guide. We have it for windows and also outside doors, and then also for facades. However, for the facades, I have to say, in this particular specialist training, we're only talking about them very briefly. There is a special webinar, a separate special webinar for that, because especially when it comes to the fixings, there are much, much higher uh, requirements that you probably need an engineer for. So I think it's probably a bit too much for this fundamental training. And I would also like to introduce you with our specialist information on the assembly for pre-installation. We're also showing this at the trade fair right here. This is also available on our website online. This is again a very interesting and new assembly and installation process where the installation is actually done in two steps, which means you're doing it very, very early on in the building carcass, where you basically have a blind frame installed, which offers the connection and the interface to the next person who will provide the plaster. So this is very interesting. This is also very important and convenient. And with that, basically, the assembly and installation process can be streamlined. And I can also, of course, make sure that the window damaging during the so-called wet construction phase can be prevented. So that you're basically using this installation frame. It's got a separate frame in it with a PVC film included in it, or if you want to have more protection, you can also put a PVC plate in it, and then the windows will only be installed once the outer plaster and the inner plaster is there, and also the floor covering. So it's very, very comparable to the sanitary uh, installations, where nobody would really come up with the idea to have a very high premium ceramics um, bathtub, a shower, or a sink to already put that up during the wet phase, because probably this would be unusable after the fact. And so this is also the same philosophy that we have here for this particular installation frame. This is also part of the training. that we can actually look at these modern assembly systems. So with this particular specialist training, I would say you are very well qualified in order to be able to really plan these assemblies in a professional way and even head them. This is also, of course, a great uh, career opportunity for pre-existing specialists, for people on their way to become a foreman who really want to get additional qualification, and they will then also be able to head as installation and assembly teams to plan this, and also, of course, returns processes are included in this. So you really have a profound and comprehensive knowledge. And now that's my first part, and of course, I've got my colleague Killian Kneide here. Killian, why don't you join me on stage here so that he can actually introduce the installation planner, because if you don't know it, this is what we know from the seminars, right? As soon, especially when we're in the statics part, and you can say, hey, you can also have it a bit simpler. You don't actually need to do this manually. There's actually a free software for that. Then you can really see how a load is taken off the participants' shoulders, because then you don't necessarily need detailed mathematical knowledge, because not everybody is a born mathematician or specialist engineer. So everybody's pretty much just happy when there's a good piece of software, right? Okay, so I would now hand over to Mr. Kneide, who is going to go through the installation planner, just so you get a good feeling about what we're dealing with here. And I would say, you know, every single assembly operation or window manufacturer who is not using this installation planner is at fault themselves. Right, thank you very much, Jürgen. Welcome also from my side. I showed up here relatively spontaneously, and it's now my pleasure to show you the IFT installation planner. My colleague Jürgen Benitz already mentioned it. The IFT installation planner is freely available for every single person. It is available on the website. You can simply go into the browser, you type in IFT-Montage Planner, and then you will end up on the homepage. Just to explain briefly, what is that actually? Well, this is an intelligent configurator in order to plan the connections of individual construction components. All of this is also very easy to use. It is basically not in need of any particular specialist knowledge. Now, certainly, of course, it makes sense to know your way around what you're dealing with, but regarding the use case and the utilization, it is very simple, and you can also try around things. Now, we first are checking in the program whether we want to go around or what the actual approach is. And you can already see an overview. On the left-hand side, you have the menu. This is the different process. And the end product of all of this is the IFT installation class, or the assembly and installation documentation. This summarizes everything. You've basically proven how you've actually planned the installation. Then, of course, you can also see the individual buttons, and you can basically change anything, both in terms of dimensions as well as the window positioning. You can change that dynamically. You can see that here. Right, so we can, for example, push it to the outside, further to the inside. We can change the thickness of the walls, depending on what we need, of course, the thickness of the plaster. In the database, in the background, for example, we also have the heat conductivity in there, and we're, of course, also using this for a physical calculation in order to make sure that the heat insulation ordinance is fulfilled or not. And then, of course, we also have a reference profile, a neutral profile, if you will. You can, of course, also have manufacturer-specific profiles. So, of course, we are also having the important ones in there. So, for example, you can also choose the vertical loads, and it's really also about the dimensioning of the fixing um, units. And then under construction project, we can define where that actually is. We can also align the wind load, which of course is necessary for the dimensionization of these um, fixings. And then you can see that within just a couple of seconds, I've actually determined the wind load in Rosenheim for our imaginary construction here. Now, if you've never done that, this is definitely going to keep you up for like about half a day just to get that information. It's already in there. And that alone, that feature alone is well worth it. It makes your work in the day-to-day a lot easier. So I'm also going to be seeing the vertical use load. So this is something that definitely also puts a burden on the wing. This, of course, needs to be transferred into the actual wall. So you can see I've selected private households here. And then in the next menu item, of course, we can also add additional weights, like, for example, to calculate the element weights. And then, of course, we can see the wall construction. We, of course, have the respective construction that we always use in Germany. We can select all of those different things. So let's just look at that based on the BDVS example. So I'm again choosing the circumference and the planning, and our technical drawing in the middle automatically adjusts to the information. And of course, we can continue to change all of that. We can, for example, change the window position yet again very easily, and look at the individual cross section. So here you can see the technical drawing for the top and the bottom. This is relatively new in the program. Of course, we're continuing to enhance the capabilities. They're very big projects when it comes to the actual programming. And we're also, of course, working on adding new features all the time, like I just said. So the next menu item is the wall material, which I've already mentioned initially. You can, of course, select any and all material you want. Now, just to explain, we are currently in an IFT neutral version. So we are working in a product neutral way. The program tells you we need a window construction, screw a neutral one. And then after that, of course, you will also need to get in contact with the respective manufacturer and choose the right product. However, below the menu, there's also some links. You can see that here. This is on the specific versions of the IFT planner. This is where you will get automatic product recommendations, which could be working in this situation as well. These products are assessed, they are reviewed. So either us or other review institutes actually determine the quality of this material in the wall, like, for example, certain tiles in the concrete with a certain edge distance. Now, these load values are actually in the database, and the program will further align whether this all works or not. Like, for example, the wind loads, can the wind load actually be transferred into the wall via the construction? If yes, it's good. If no, you can, of course, optimize the dimensions of these particular fixings. So the program either tries to reduce the distances, or you will simply use an alternative fixing. So, for example, if a screw isn't enough, you're going to be using a console or a rail in order to assemble all of this. And I'm going to demonstrate the neutral version so that you get a quick overview of the program. We can also add window blinds. These are all neutral ones. And I think for the window blinds, the big thing is, of course, that you need a three-side fixing, which of course also leads to the fact that according to the assembly and installation guide, we have to dimensionize the fixings. But we'll simply leave the standard now just so we can demonstrate it quickly. When it comes to the window element pane, we can work on that. And as long as everything stays at a right angle, we can, of course, do that very quickly. So I can choose a two-part element, which, of course, number one, has an effect on the wind load, but then, of course, also has an effect on the weight. And then if I click on this particular field, I can choose the opening type as well as the type of glazing for the windows. And this all, of course, can have an influence on the load, on the horizontal load. For example, if you open the and then you have a lateral force applied to the screws. You might also have an axial load. Now, all of this is done automatically in the background. You don't need any theoretical knowledge about any of this, and therefore, of course, it's pretty helpful. It makes it a lot easier when you're planning your installation. Now, I'm going to leave this. This is just going to be the standard, and unfortunately, sorry, I'm not very used to doing all of this with a trackpad. I'm sorry. I'm trying my very best here. And the next step, we can define a window sill for the outside and the inside. The inside, it's mainly just for completeness sake, but it doesn't really have a major influence on our heat technical calculations. External window sills, however, you can, of course, select different window sills that may or may not be better for certain types of rains. Now, this, of course, is also hugely important. If you have a non-rain proof windowsill, then we need a second level to compensate for that, that guides the water. Here you can see that second level. And we, of course, also have these so-called sponges in there. And this is again for rain, for driving rain specifically. And again, you can see we've just changed it. So you can see how all of this is working below the window. So all of this is done automatically without any theoretical knowledge. Different window material can also be chosen. The usual ones, PVC, wood, aluminum, or wood metal. We can also define a frame color. That's not for the visual element. This, of course, also has something to do with the technicalities of it all. And we are, of course, doing the dimensions for the joints. Um, this depends on, of course, the frame, the window size, etc. So we are basically defining the minimum necessary joint width so that the window doesn't get caught up in the actual wall, and we are uh, trying to really avoid damages. And of course, as always, this can be done automatically. Of course, you can also make the joint bigger if you want, and simply type all of that in manually. And as I've mentioned, we have a standard profile system, a manufacturer neutral system, but of course you can choose from many different manufacturers in the first place. Now, amongst them, there are, of course, various profiles available. You can also choose different frames or wings. And you can also type in the respective weight to calculate the overall weight of the window element. Core topic of the installation planner is, of course, the planning of the installation, but then, of course, also the ceiling. So now we're actually moving on to the most important menu items where you don't really need to do much because the program is doing a bit for you here. So we have the fixings. We can also click on the um, diagram on the actual image, how you want to do that. Do you just want to fix it laterally? Do you want to fix it around the circumference? You can basically do whatever you want. Here you can also see that it can be taken place on two opposite sides, but we are now going to fix it on three sides with no fixing at the top. According to the assembly and installation guidelines, we also have to have to determine the dimensions. If there is no fixing at the top, these loads, these wind loads, basically have to be transferred via the side elements. And with that, we're basically breaking down the window element into different surfaces. They are allocated accordingly. And then, of course, we're calculating the respective load for the individual points with the respective um, carrying load capacities of the respective elements. It sounds very complicated, but this is actually quite simple. This is what it is. Now, to explain it briefly, here we're assembling a installation track, but why do we need this track? It's because our distance to the outside of the wall is not enough for a screw. So this is according to the installation guide recommendations. We've entered this into the particular program, and the real products are, of course, assessed and reviewed for different um, distances, and they're also stored in the program. So here we can actually not pick a screw. The program will also not allow you to use a screw and will immediately switch to a rail or a track. And moving on to the sealing and insulation system, we are choosing from pre-entered systems. Now, of course, we're always making sure that there are no errors in the actual calculation in the software. Here we have an external plaster edge, but of course we can choose different systems. We can also choose different sealing strips and insulation strips. Here you can see it's inside as well as outside, but we can also deactivate this particular strip. This is simply an additional sealing during the construction phase, just to make sure that there is no damage that occurs. However, if you're also if you want to deactivate it, you can actually deactivate it right here. This is the product out external. So here it's optional, and now it's simply gone. So we basically foamed the entire joint. And so let's just say, okay, we're happy with this particular window insert. Then we can create the installation documentation. We can, of course, also change the framework details. This is basically standardized, but of course, there's also other requirements. So you can type in the respective values that you want. We also have the technical calculation, which you could deactivate. It's not really necessary anymore. This is simply due to the fact that this calculation usually took relatively long and usually quite around 6 minutes, but now it's mostly done in about half a minute, 30 seconds, and I have to register quickly. So the tool is free for everyone. This is financed by the companies that are basically uh, making their elements available, and we're basically allowing each and every single manufacturer, and yeah, we're open to anyone. I clicked on create installation, so now the program tells us to pick a main wing. This is, of course, important for the actual allocations and the different blocks and logs. Let's say the second one is the actual window. So now we're doing the FEM calculation. They're seeing if all of the protective measures are fulfilled. If not, then there are some tips as to how you can uh, rectify this, like, for example, work on the insulation or reposition the window elements. In this case, everything worked, and we can download our installation documentation, and here it is. This is where we have all of the information that we have summarized from the program. It's in a PDF. We also have the information whether the minimum heat insulation has been fulfilled. Of course, we're also separating the individual cases, standard case 1, standard case 2. This is, of course, also through the non-circumference installation or even the additional loads that we have in the standard case 2. This is the dimension of the means that we talked about, the establishing of the dimensions. And then you can see the summary of all the different materials and products that we require for the window installation. The technical drawing, of course, is also here. This is for all 3 connections. And then also, of course, the thermal calculations with the calculation of the FRSI factor and the minimum heat insulation. Now then, of course, we have the window fixing. Right here, the program automatically calculates where the fixings have to be positioned with the respective distances, how many you need, and of course also which fixing products you need. Of course, according to the actual installation guide, we've also got the blogs and logs logged in here according to the main wing without any fixing at the top, like we said. And on the following page, we have all the different loads listed according to the individual directions. And here we've got neutral products, a neutral window installation track, and now with this particular IFD installation guide, you can go to the manufacturer and you can require for the individual fixings for the respective loads in this particular subsection. But again, if you're working with the company-specific version of the assembly and installation planner, of course, we will recommend the right products for this particular installation situation. And now to wrap things up, of course, we also have additional tips for the ceilings and for the fixings. We can also see additional elements for the window sill, should it be longer than 1 meter. We can also see the water guiding levels. And of course, if you're planning with the specific products, you can also see the data sheets on the used products. Thank you very much for your attention. And back to Jürgen Benitz.
Yeah, thank you, Kilian. I think this is already giving us a very good impression of what a great tool that has become in the meantime. And of course, the good news is that everything is free of charge. So for the users, at least, it is free of charge. Thank you so much also for the partners who support us in our efforts. And if you see that, of course, you might ask yourself, okay, what do I need a training for? Because the software is already taking over everything that I am supposed to do. But whoever has used the software or people who do use their software can confirm that the software is just as good as the person using it. So if you don't have the right background knowledge and the right skill set, then of course there is a higher likelihood of mistakes. And there are some cases that are not taken into account in the software, and you also have to arrange for some adjustments for which you simply need the background knowledge, which is why we really recommend every single company that wants to ensure a good assembly that they have at least one staff member that actually has such a training. And the training is also a precondition in order to get a certification and to be monitored also by the professional associations that you are in a position to implement a RAL assembly. So this would already be it with respect to the information regarding the vocational training. Of course, you have the opportunity to ask questions. I see that no questions were sent in online. Perhaps there are any questions from the audience here on site regarding this training for becoming an assembly specialist. Then we are happy to take them. If you don't have any questions right away, we are still out there on the trade fair booth with the godfather of assembly. I would like to say, as somebody who's also authoring this guideline for the assembly, so you can really take the opportunity and ask questions and join us at our trade fair booth. Any questions to the left, to the right? Nothing? How about the technical part? Nothing? Okay, so let's just check my tablet one more time. No questions online. So this should be it. I would like to really thank the Trade Fair Center of Nuremberg to give me the opportunity to speak to you at this forum. I just have to say thank you so much and enjoy the weekend.